Hello students, welcome back to Edupedia Word Videos. My topic for the presentation is 6th section of the chapter Kingdom Plantae. In this section of the video, we will be discussing about the angiosperm pollination and reproduction. In my previous section of the presentation, I have taught you about the male gamete development and female gamete development in angiosperms, which are also called as flowering plants. Now we'll be talking about how union of male and female gametes or fertilization takes place in angiosperm plants. So the plant reproductive structures are now ready for the union of male and female gamete or fertilization, which eventually will produce a seed with viable embryo and cotyledons. Cotyledons are the leaf which sprout out from a seedling just after germination. Before that step takes place, however, the pollen must be transferred from anther to stigma. Stigma is a part of a female gametophyte or female reproductive organ. Okay. So biotic agents such as birds, insects, mammals, and abiotic agents such as wind, water, they can accomplish this transfer process, which is called as pollination. And after landing on a stigma, I'm talking about the pollen grain. Pollen grain, when it lands on the stigma, pollen tube emerges out from the pollen grain apertures. Okay, I have already taught you in detail in the previous section of the presentation. You can refer to that for better understanding, but for the time being, just know that when pollen grain it falls or it lands on a stigma, which is a female reproductive organ, pollen tube it emerges through a pollen grain aperture if the environment is high in humidity. And successful germination of pollen in stigma requires nutrients. That means it needs energy to carry out this process. And in most plants, growth of the pollen tube lasts between 12 and 48 hours from pollen germination to fertilization. I repeat, in most plants, growth of the pollen tube lasts between 12 and 48 hours from pollen tube germination to fertilization. Okay. So pollen germination, it starts with pollen tube. Obviously, when pollen tube emerges from a pollen grain aperture, then it just gets inserted inside the female reproductive organ, and thus pollination takes place. Okay, so pollen germination, it starts with pollen tube initiation, elongation, and penetration of a stigmatic tissue, and during this period intense metabolic activity takes place. Intense metabolic activity takes place during pollination of angiosperms. Tube must synthesize, or I repeat, pollen tube it must synthesize membrane material and cell wall for growth and expansion. And simultaneously at its tip, the tube it carries a vegetative cell nucleus, which is followed by germinative cell. As we know that this is the pollen grain, and it has germinative cell and vegetative cell. Okay, so when it falls or when it forms a tube and it enters the stigma, see this is the pollen tube and it has entered to fertilize it. See, this is the bulgy part is the female reproductive organ, and thus it forms egg nucleus. This is the egg nucleus. This is the zoom view of a female reproductive organ which is present inside the ovary. This is the egg nucleus. These two are the synogytes. These are three are antipodal cells, and these two are polar nuclei. And then it forms endosperm nucleus. This is zygote, and this is the seed formation that is taking place. This is the seed coat, and this is the endosperm that provides energy carry out the metabolic activity. Okay, and thus this seed then finally forms seedling. and these are the cotyledons which sprout out from a seedling just after the germination. So I hope it is clear to you now that pollen germination starts with pollen tube initiation, elongation, and penetration of stigmatic tissue. See, this is the stigma, and this tissue is called as stigmatic tissue. See, this is angiosperm reproduction. This is the female reproductive part. This is the male reproductive part, which is called as stamen. This is anther, and this is the filament. This is the central axis. This is sepal. This is petal, which is a colored part. Okay. See, this is the colored flower. This is the female reproductive part, this is the male reproductive part, which is has anther, and this is the filament, and it is the zoom view of a female reproductive part, which is ovule. This is megaspore mother cell, which is diploid in nature, that's why it is denoted by 2n. Then it undergoes meiosis to form 4 cells which are haploid in number, that's why it is represented by n, which is called as megaspores, and 3 gets degenerated, only 1 develops. Okay, and see, these 3 are the degenerating megaspores, and then 8 nuclei within cytoplasm of a single cell is formed. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 8 nuclei within cytoplasm of a single cell is formed, and these 3 it gets degenerated. So this is the egg cell. Now this 2 center nuclei are called as polar nuclei, which is present within the central cell. Okay, see, this is the mature pollen grain, which has exine, which is the outer layer. Then this is the intine, and this is the tube cell nucleus. Then fusion of a sperm nucleus with 2 polar nuclei takes place. See, this is the sperm, this pink one is sperm, and these 2 are the polar nuclei of female reproductive organ, and these are the integuments, outer integument, this is inner integument, and this is nucellus. Then fusion of sperm with egg takes place. This is the sperm, and fusion of sperm and egg takes place, and this is how reproduction occurs in angiosperms. Okay, see, this is the nucellus, this is inner integument, this is outer integument, this is endosperm cell, which is triploid in nature, that is 3n. This is the sperm and 2 polar nuclei, so it entire apparatus is called as endosperm cell, which is triploid in nature. And then beginning of cotyledon takes place when fusion occurs between these 3 cells. This is the endosperm, which provides nutrient to the developing embryo. See, this is the developing embryo, and these are the cotyledons. Cotyledons are the initial leaf that sprout out from a seedling just after the germination. So this is one cotyledon and this is another cotyledon, so that's why it is called as dicotyledon. But when only one leaf sprout out from a seedling just after the germination, then that is called as monocotyledon. This yellow part is endosperm that give nutrient for carrying out the metabolic activity. This is the shoot tip, that means it give rise to shoot system of a plant body in the later stages of progression. This is the embryo. This is the root tip, which give rise to root in later stages of progression. Okay, so this is how it is. Okay, so this is the flower, which is a unique characteristic, or brightly colored flower, which is a unique characteristic of angiosperms. This is the female reproductive part. These filaments or anther, they are the male reproductive flowers. This is the ovary. These are the integuments. This is the zygote, which is 2n in number. Zygote give rise to embryo. Integument, it give rise to seed coat, and ovary give rise to fruit. So ovary later becomes fruit, integument it becomes seed coat, and zygote it becomes embryo. Okay, and triploid endosperm cell, that means sperm when it fuses with two polar nuclei, then it forms endosperm cell. So triploid endosperm cell, it gives rise to endosperm in later stages of progression. Okay, so this is flower and this is fruit. So from flower, fruit forms. I hope it is clear to you now. Now we'll talk about the fertilization and reproduction. So the union of one sperm with egg is known as fertilization. I repeat, union of one sperm with egg is called as fertilization. However, several developmental processes in the vegetative and germinative cell, they prepare two sperms for a process which is known as double fertilization. A mitotic division of germinative cell, it generates the sperm cell, and this process that can take place on growing pollen tube or inside the pollen grain. And in a growing pollen tube, vegetative nucleus, it disintegrates and the sperm cells will take the lead and it will enter the embryo sac for successful fertilization. And usually the interaction between pollen grain and pistil, which is called as scalpel, it ensures that a sperm cell will often reach the micropyle of a ovule. I've already taught you about the two ends of a ovule, micropylar end and chalagial end. You can refer to the previous section of the presentation for better understanding. Okay, so once the sperm reaches the micropyle end, see this is the micropylar end, and these are the antipodal cells. These two cells are called as polar nuclei. These are the synergid cells, which are two in number, and a sperm, it goes and fuses. So once a sperm reaches the micropylar end, the growth of other tube stops, and in the embryo sac, which is called as female gametocyte, four cells, they are located at micropylar side, and of those four, the first pair that a sperm cell will encounter are called as synergids. So these two cells which are present here, they are called as synergids, and a sperm, it fuses with the synergids. So one of these is always bigger than the other and it carries the filiform apparatus. Okay, and a structure that resembles hair that degenerate just after pollination and before fertilization. Filiform apparatus is nothing, it is just a structure that resembles hair that degenerate after pollination and before fertilization. And one of the sperm cell will fuse with the egg, and thus it produces zygote, which is 2n, that is diploid, and the other sperm cell will fuse with the primary endosperm nucleus, and thus it generates endosperm. So endosperm, it provides nutrients to carry out the metabolic activity of embryo. Okay, so there are the two sperm cells. One sperm cell will fuse with the egg and thus it produces zygote, and the other sperm cell will fuse with the primary endosperm nucleus and thus it generates endosperms. So the remaining cells of the gametophyte, they are antipodals, which are present here, 1, 2 and 3. See, these three are the antipodal cells. They usually degenerate after fertilization has taken place. And please note, students, that synergids, see, which are present here, 1 and 2, two synergids, they act as chemical attractants to the pollen tube, which penetrate the synergids via filiform apparatus. Filiform apparatus, they are nothing that they just resemble hair that degenerate after pollination and before fertilization, and then it releases the two sperm cells. I hope it is now clear to you now how fertilization takes place in angiosperms. Okay, so let's see a zoom view of how pollen grain tube enters the female reproductive part. See, this is the female reproductive part. This is the stigma, which is very receptive to pollen grain. So pollen grain, when it lands on the stigma, it pollen tube emerges from a pollen grain aperture and it enters the style, and then it finally enters the ovary and it reaches the here. See, this orange color, it is representing a pollen tube, and these two are the sperms present, and thus it goes inside the ovules. See, these 6 are the ovules. Okay, it enters the ovules, and these two are the sperms, it enters here, inside the ovule and it fuses with the synergid cells. See, this is the synergid cells. 1 and 2 are the synergid cells, and this is the micropylar end, and this is the egg cell. So when sperm it fuses with the egg, then it forms zygote. And when another sperm, see, two sperms are there, one sperm and two sperm. So one sperm it fuses with this egg, okay, and it forms zygote. And another sperm, which is this, it goes and fuses with this apparatus, and thus it forms endosperm, okay, that provides nutrient to the developing embryo to carry out the metabolic activities. And these antipodal cells, they just get degenerated in later stages. So a pollen grain, it adheres to the stigma, which contain two cells, a generative cell and a tube cell. And then pollen tube cell, it grows into a style. See, this is the style. See, this is the style, okay. So pollen tube cell, it grows into a style, and the generative cell travel inside the pollen tube. It divides to form two sperms, okay, and the pollen tube penetrates an opening in the ovule, which is called as micropyle, and one of the sperm, it fertilizes the egg to form diploid zygote, which is 2n, and the other sperm, it fertilizes two polar nuclei to form triploid endosperm, which will become a food source for growing embryo. That's the nature, okay. I hope it is clear to you now how pollination and fertilization takes place in angiosperms. So this was all about it. Thank you and keep watching Edupedia word videos.